I'm Jennifer Gilmour and I'm an author and advocate for women in abusive relationships. I want to get to the answers to the questions that many have from those that work in the domestic abuse sector, getting an inside feel of what it's really like in their job role and sharing it with all of you.
Good evening, everyone. Probably something you're not expecting is to see me here, but I just wanted to do a little introduction to the talk. I've only kept together a 20-minute segment from mine and John's talk in this clip, and that's because we didn't have the video link with John. It's probably best to listen to because it is an hour long, but it's all important information. So what I wanted to do was just give you the first part of the interview. We cover what stalking is and what that includes. It's really informative and interesting, so hopefully you will stay for the next 20 minutes. If you want to listen to the full thing, I've put it up early. You can find it on abusetalk.co.uk and it is available to listen to now. So you can head over there if you would like to and listen in there. Of course, it's Wednesday. It's Wednesday evening, so at 8 o'clock UK time, we will be tweeting on Twitter, and we will be covering the topic of stalking over there for the evening. So you may want to join us and let us know what your thoughts were on the talk. Anyway, I'm going to stop waffling on, but hope you're having a good evening and hope you enjoy this interview. Right, hi everybody. Welcome to the next episode of the #Abuse Talk podcast. Today I am joined by John Trott, who I have known for years, and I think we originally connected through the Twitter chat. So I'm really delighted because I've tried to pin John down for a while to do a podcast and specifically thinking about stalking today. John is a highly experienced detective and having served with the Devon and Cornwall Police for over 28 years and retiring as a detective chief inspector in 2016. He was responsible for the prevention and investigation of domestic abuse, sexual abuse, child and vulnerable adult abuse, and for the final 4 years of his police career, he was the force lead for domestic abuse, stalking and harassment, forced marriage, honour-based abuse, female genital mutilation, and safeguarding vulnerable adults and adults at risk. And that is just a snippet. That's just a tip off the iceberg, I would say. So welcome, John. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. No, it's good to be here. And sorry it's taken so long. I do appreciate you've been trying to pin me down. Yeah, no, it's great to be here because at the end of the day, I think the subject matter we're going to be talking about is really, really important. Very passionate about it. And hopefully, victim survivors and professionals, anybody that's listening will take something positive away from it and, just be able to make use of it for the future.
Well, I mean, to be honest, I don't doubt that at all because you've been so helpful in my personal journey as well. So I think everybody is going to learn something from this. So can you just tell us, I mean, I've just given a snapshot of your sort of career there, but obviously I have read your bio and it is pretty vast, isn't it?
Well, the way you've explained it, it sounds vast. Obviously, I have got that experience within the police service. It's some time ago now, isn't it? It's 4 years, and I'm at pains actually now because people introduced me in terms of obviously having been a detective, a senior detective in those areas, which is quite right to highlight, I think. And as I've already said, passionate about it, and perhaps as we go through the talk today, then I'll bring out some of those reasons as to why. But I'm at pains really to say that obviously since my time in the police service, I've still been working as abuse-free life, which is my work, but working with other agencies and indeed other charities as well, to just try and highlight those particular areas, but particularly for me around domestic abuse, coercive control and stalking. that's what I've been doing for the last 4 years, and indeed dealing with and helping victims and survivors who are still having issues potentially with services, not just the police service, because I know that's something you want to talk about today, but all agencies actually, because every agency has a part to play in and around domestic abuse and indeed stalking.
Well, we're talking about stalking today, and I've had, quite a few questions in there. Obviously, some of them are quite specific to that person. So I first thought we should probably sort of unpick what stalking is. So could you just explain to us what is stalking?
Well, amazingly, some may know this already, but some don't. Certainly the professionals that I deliver training to around this area, most indeed don't realise that there is no legal definition for stalking, which is bizarre really when you think about how many people are affected by stalking. But stalking in effect, and the definition that I like to reflect on, because actually if you look at various definitions that various charities, agencies have come up with, but the one I like best, and they're a great organisation, the Susie Lampley Trust, is the one which basically stalking is a pattern of fixated and obsessive behaviour, which is repeated, persistent, intrusive, and causes fear of violence or engenders alarm and distress in the victim. Look, it's nothing new. It's been around for a long time. It's not just come to light since 2012, which is when the legislation for stalking came in. It's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, but obviously it's talked about a lot now, and it sort of came to light really, or got media attention sort of from the mid-80s with various things happening within the United States, which is actually where the first stalking legislation came about.
Right. I mean, I didn't actually know there wasn't a legal definition for stalking. So I guess, is that something we should consider changing?
Well, there is legislation around stalking, but no legal definition into it, as I say. So there is legislation about it, and and perhaps we'll touch on that a bit later, because I know some of the questions you want to ask me talk about that legal aspect. But I think that the thing for me and for everybody to remember is it's really, really serious. It's life-changing. Many people and many victims will lose jobs, their relationships get affected, they potentially lose friends as well. There's massive physical and emotional effects, whether that be through anxiety, sleep disturbances, distrust of people, disorders, potential self-harm, definitely post-traumatic stress disorder. And these can be really severe, they can be long lasting. It makes people, victims, hypersensitive, really hypervigilant, effectively always looking over their shoulder. Can give people financial, social loss, and it has a massive impact on the family, whether as parents, children, siblings, etc., etc. So it's really serious, and needs to be treated as such, and needs to be dealt with very quickly when agencies, not just the police, but agencies, it's drawn to their attention, or they become aware of it, and they need to take quick action, because actually the quicker you take action in relation to a perpetrator of stalking, from now on I'm going to call them a stalker for the purposes today, Jenny, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's fine.
In terms of a stalker, the quicker you do that, then the quicker the whole matters can hopefully be dealt with, including the perpetrator, which will then put a stop to it. The fact of the matter is, it's very similar for a victim for coercive control, who may have been in a domestic abuse relationship with coercive control, and stalking and the types of behaviours within stalking can be very similar. But the fact is, I'm lucky enough, I think you and I have had this discussion before, and I'm not going to go into massive detail about my family life and things, but let me tell you, and you know, happily married, so we have 3 children, and I wake up in the morning wondering, what we're going to do in 4 months, 5 months, 6 months time, potentially where we're going to go on holiday, those types of things. nowhere at the moment, actually, but bearing in mind obviously what's going on around the world. But you know, the types of things I don't have to worry about, things that victims of stalking have to worry about, which is they're waking up in the morning wondering how they're going to keep themselves safe for today, not tomorrow, but for today. How am I going to keep myself? How am I going to keep my children safe today? So they're waking up every morning with that fear, and I think it's really important, certainly for professionals, to think about that and try and put, and it's never easy, obviously, but to try and take off their professional heads for a minute when they come across such things as domestic abuse and or stalking, and try and put a head on of the victim, if you like, and try and imagine it. And you can never imagine it if you've never been through it, and everybody is different, of course, and everybody's experience of domestic abuse and or stalking are different, but you just need to take your professional head off for a minute and try and look at it through that, through the head of a victim or through the eyes of a victim. And if you're waking up every single morning wondering how you're going to keep yourself safe, I'll just take you back to that. Clearly, it's going to give you some anxiety, probably sleep disturbances, distrust, eating disorders, all sorts of things, post-traumatic stress. So.
And I mean, when we think about stalking, I don't know, maybe the media has helped with that, but we imagine, you know, somebody in the bushes, in the back garden looking through our window. We imagine somebody following us physically. But obviously there's, you know, society and our technology has changed, and there's maybe such thing as digital stalking. So what is digital stalking?
Well, digital stalking, well, another name for it is cyber stalking, but it's effectively where stalkers are using digital technologies to keep track and monitor the victim. It can take many different forms, but basically it's obviously stalking online via online channels such as social media, within forums or via emails, but it is typically planned over a sustained period of time. They may feel like to a victim or to somebody looking out from the inside, certainly from the outside looking in, are seemingly harmless at the beginning, but it's that constant drip of those types of behaviours that obviously become systematic, become annoying, and can become really frightening for somebody. So I hear what you say about people in bushes. Believe me, that still goes on. Know of cases where people have been even in a wardrobe in somebody's house, and but that still goes on. But obviously today, with the technology around today, cyber stalking, digital stalking will usually go hand in hand, and we know from the research that's been done in terms of the percentages that I think Susie Lamprey Trust recently did some work. I think it was just over 90% of all stalking cases will have some form of digital stalking as well. But the point is, even if it was just digital stalking, and when I say just, I don't mean that to minimise it at all, but if it was just that type of stalking, at some stage, a perpetrator of stalking, a stalker, will want to get up close and personal to that particular victim. So they're using that to collect information and intelligence, if you like, to then obviously continue their stalking behaviours for their end goal, whatever that may be. And of course, that may vary from victim to victim. I just want to say, if I can, please, Jen, is that we need to be very clear in terms of, you often hear the term, they're sort of hand in glove together, but, and apologies because sometimes I get my phrases wrong, but, you know, hand in glove together, you hear stalking and harassment in the same sentence. Right. Stalking and harassment. It isn't harassment. It's not harassment. I can tell you from the work that I did within the police service just prior to leaving, the final couple of years of leaving, I did some of my own work in relation to looking at those cases that had come in that were crimed as, police word, but crimed as harassment. But actually, when you asked a few more questions of the victim or did a bit more digging and investigation, you realised actually it wasn't harassment, it was stalking. And every single case I looked at was stalking. And actually, the police, National Police Chiefs Council and the CPS did a big piece of work in 2017 and produced a thing called the Living in Fear report. And every single case that they looked at from around the UK, it turns out at some stage, 100% of their cases they looked at, there were failings in every single one.
Yeah.
In terms of the investigation. Doesn't mean that, you know, they didn't do things right and there were just some failings. But clearly, the point is, and as I say with that, every case that I've ever come across, when you do a bit more digging around an investigation, it's actually stalking. You would have been able to prove a more serious offence of stalking than harassment. So I'd love for harassment to just be taken off the books in terms of the stalking aspect, because the trouble is for professionals, if they hear stalking and harassment, on occasions, not every occasions, but they start looking at the harassment aspect as opposed to stalking, which is obviously lesser. But again, coming back to a victim, if they're waking up in the morning, wondering how they're going to keep themselves safe, they're having to make substantial changes to their life, in effect, because the rest of us don't have to do it, you know, that are in good relationships. But so therefore, it's going to be stalking. It's not going to be harassment.
Yeah, I think I've spoken to quite a few people, you know, that have come out of an abusive relationship, and sometimes it's being classed as malicious communications as well. And I think there's quite a bit of terminology that goes around or where it could fit, and maybe it's just that we need to be more specific to looking at what classifies it as which one. But anyway, so what would you say, at what point does stalking become a criminal offence? Because obviously that's something that needs to shed some light on that one as well. I think a lot of people are confused.
Well, I think this is where it comes back to there not being a legal definition for stalking. So I think it's important really just to consider in terms of that question, when does stalking become a criminal offence? Actually, what type of behaviours occur, or does a stalker use against a victim first, and then put that into the current legislation? So I think I've mentioned, but behaviours themselves that a stalker will use might actually seem to people on the outside really unremarkable. And there's still considerable ambiguity regarding how you actually define behaviour that constitutes stalking. But the big thing really is that the crux of the issue lies in the fact that it's how the victim experience unwanted contact as opposed to the contact itself. So it's how the victim experiences the unwanted contact as opposed to the contact itself. So I may experience some particular contact, and actually it doesn't cause me an issue. But you could, Jenny, and I mean this in the nicest way, but you could obviously experience the same behaviour, and it would have an impact on you because of obviously what may have been going on in your life could be different to mine. So when you look at that, you have to look at what are unwanted communications or contacts, and in effect, unwanted communications can include telephone calls from people, emails, you know, from the stalker. It could include, it's unlikely nowadays, isn't it? But letters even. We don't get letters nowadays, do we? I used to say faxes, but I think they've gone out now. But you know, messaging, there can be potentially graffiti. Graffiti is a big one. It's a real precursor. If you start getting graffiti or criminal damage, it's a real precursor to know things are going to get worse potentially. Therefore, needs to be taken really seriously by the authorities. But social network, contacting other people. You know, the stalker contacting other people that you wouldn't want them to contact. So those would be unwanted communications. Unwanted intrusions would be things like, good old police word this, but loitering, maybe near the victim's home or workplace. Monitoring, we've already touched on the online stuff, but on and offline. spying. I said you sort of mentioned it, but people in, they sit in cars, they sit in hedges and all sorts, but maybe interfering with your property, following you, entering a victim's home or workplace, sending or leaving materials or gifts, ordering or cancelling goods and services, and making vexatious complaints. That's a real big one. I have people that come to me and talk about family courts where they've been in an intimate partner relationship, the relationship is finished, perhaps the divorce has happened, but there's still, there's one of the partners will keep taking the victim of stalking, if bearing in mind that's what we're looking at today, back to the family court.
Yeah.
With no evidence, no changes. But what happens, of course, with vexatious complaints is that if somebody makes a complaint to an organisation, be it Children's Social Care, be it the police, be it whoever, they have a duty, understandably, of having to investigate that. And whilst it never may go anywhere, the victim themselves, who knows, look, I've done nothing wrong, still gets put through a lot of heartache and grief and worry. So those are, vexatious complaints. We talked about digital stalking, but we're talking about property damage and violence. So those are the types of unwanted communications that occur. And as I say, in the grand scheme of things, if somebody from the outside was looking in, they wouldn't necessarily consider that as stalking.
Right.
But the crux of the matter, as I say, comes back to the victim. What their experience of it is, what is their experience of the unwanted contact, as opposed to, as I say, the types of contact itself. And if ultimately that is putting them in fear of violence, potentially, or it's having a substantial adverse effect on their day-to-day life, and that or is really important, then they are being stalked.